Hello everyone. Today we'll discuss the topic of blending data in Looker Studio. Let's start by saying that data blending can be very useful when we have different data sources and we need to combine them in a way that allows us to use fields from one table and another table in our visualizations. In our example today, we have a data source that contains information about projects and the amounts coming in for these projects, and another data source that combines the technology characteristic for these projects. Based on the source we took the data from, we have a Looker Studio table, and accordingly we have some buffer of general data with our categories. And we have project info with our technologies. In our case, I specifically chose through a filter to focus only on the project, so that we could simply and clearly examine how data blending works. So, where can we set up our data blending? First, through resources. We can add manage blends, and here we can add blends. A very important note is that before adding blended data, we must check that both our resources are in our resources. If you need to add more than two, accordingly, there should be as many as you want to use in your blended data, and only after that proceed to combining. So we return to data blending. We go to Manage Blends and add a blend. And then a dialog window appears, which consists of us choosing which tables we will link. In our case, we choose Main Info, our main table. Then we have dimensions, metrics, and data range. Dimensions are all our qualitative non-countable fields, and metrics are our countable fields. In this case, we can take item, where we have our projects. For the metric, we can take the sum. We can drag it like this, and accordingly, we can immediately set the aggregation level. And then we can set the date. But in this case, it won't be particularly significant for our example, so we can omit it. But it's very important to know about the date that if we take a simple data source, and there are several date options, for example, by the period of reference or others, we can change them there. If we set a date in the data source, we will be able to choose it once, and after that, all our charts and graphs will adjust to the corresponding data range. That is, to the specific range of data indicated in our sources. We can also immediately add one of the filters to this table. After that, to combine this in the table, we need to press Join Another Table. We choose our data source from the added ones and select Project Info. Then we choose what we want to see here. We want to see the project, technology, and that's it. In general, this is all we have here. Accordingly, we don't have metrics and dates, and then we move to Join Configuration. When we move to Join Configuration, we have 5 corresponding types of our data blending. These can be left outer, right outer, inner, full outer, and cross. They differ in that left outer, as you can read here, returns matching rows from the right table plus non-matching rows from the left table. Accordingly, right outer is the opposite, returns matching rows from the left table plus non-matching rows from the right table. Then we have inner, when we select only rows that correspond to each other. There is also a type when all rows are selected, both from the left and right tables, and cross. It is used extremely rarely, but sometimes it can be useful. It will show maximum combinations. Today, we will focus more on the first 4 types, especially the first one, because it is considered the most common. So, we choose the type of our join, and then we need to establish a connection between the tables. These are very important conditions. If you want to connect 2 data sources, you need to have a certain condition. That is, our key and our columns should have the same value in both the first and second data sources. In this case, it will be item. And in this case, if in the second table we also had item and project technology, it would have been pulled by default. But since it is named project, we insert project, and now we see that we have a connection. Accordingly, we know that our projects are in the item column and also projects are in the project column. And now it will substitute the value by this key. But there is also an opportunity to add other correspondences. So we press Save and Save. We can also add a name to our blending, but by default, it will simply be called blending number 1. We save. After that, we now have an option to use our data blending in charts. Now we add a chart to see how our blending worked. We add a table, and now in Data Source, we can choose the blended data we created. Accordingly, now we choose everything we want to see. In our case, this is Item, where our project is contained, Project Technology, and Sum. And now we see that when we did a left-outer join, we have projects and technologies. Accordingly, we have projects from 1 to 7, and where technologies were not specified for projects, we have 0, and the corresponding values were pulled for us by sums. Now let's try to change our value to, for example, right outer and see how our data will change. To configure our data blending, we can either go through resources and settings of our blended data or go directly from the chart. Here we choose Edit Data Source, and accordingly, now we can change the condition, for example, to right outer. And accordingly, we keep the same key. We save. Now we go to our chart. Currently, an error is displayed as we now have project instead of item. We change it to project, and now if we also set sorting by project for clarity, for example, we now see that only those projects with the technology attribute from the right table are displayed. Accordingly, values 6 and 7 are not displayed, as it first goes by matching all rows from the right table with mismatches on the left. Accordingly, this is how right outer will look in blending. Let's also look at how it will look if we add only those that are inner. We save. Now we change it by item in the first table. And now we see that when we choose inner, only those projects remain that are present in both the first and second tables. Accordingly, from the first to the 5th project, both here and here, and now if we look at full outer, accordingly all our values will be displayed. We close and now see that even if there is no project in the first data source, but there are some technologies for projects, then accordingly the technology will light up, but the projects will not. For example, if these projects are not yet ready in our table but will be added in the future. But in this way, we see that all rows are added, both those without project technology and those that did not match with the first table. In general, this is the most common use of our data blending. I suggest you practice more with it. Just be careful that it will be a little more complicated to work with countable fields. They will need to be added either at the chart level or when we are setting up our data. That's all for today. Give it a like if you enjoyed the video. If you still have any questions, ask them in the comments.